So, there's the creator Ed Boon talked about potentially having like a streamer mode that kind of and like YouTuber mode that kind of helps him be able to post it on YouTube because it's very violent and YouTube has weird rules against it.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, when it wasn't a thing before and it's never been that serious.
Right.
So a lot of people haven't aren't able to make money on some of their videos without heavily editing out the like gory stuff. Um, But my response to that is, what do you mean you're just thinking about it? You know, you're big on accessibility, and so am I. And I
Right.
feel
Right.
like this is something Mortal Kombat should have had for years.
Oh, absolutely.
Because after they literally caused the creation of the SRB, the game's rating
Yeah.
system, um, some of the early Mortal Kombat, the 2D ones, had a blood code where you could cut off the blood, like there was no longer any more blood, and that was cool, so little
Yeah.
kids can actually play the game and their parents don't have to worry about it. But they stopped doing that at a certain point. But I think something that people who argue about, like, this is the identity of the game, it's violent, that's the point, like if you don't like that, just don't play it, which is that's not a bad argument if we're being real,
It's not.
because
It's
you're right,
not.
that is an identity of the game and no one's asking you to take it away. When it comes to accessibility, it's always about adding an option, not taking anything away, but adding
Mhm.
things to allow people to enjoy it. And what you have to take into consideration is that, as violent as it seemed back in the day, games have gotten more realistic. So the
Mhm.
gore has only gotten worse over the years. So there are probably people who were younger, or who, however old they were playing the old games, loved them, didn't mind the gore, thought it was really fun, and even played some of the early 3D games that weren't as good looking as they are now. Loved them, enjoyed them, didn't mind the gore. But as soon as they got up to the current games, like 11 and 1, are extremely realistic. Like they're basically real people, and the gore probably bothers some people. So you have to take in consideration that there are hardcore fans of the series that grew up playing it, but now it's gotten to a point to where they can't stomach the gore anymore because it's too much. And I think that those old fans should be allowed to play this game without having to worry about that gore. Like, have an
Right. And it's
option
like,
to straight up cut off the blood, but that isn't a fix all, because you still have the case of super moves, which are very useful in just the combat of the game, like the actual mechanics. People are going to do those all the time. So having an option to do something that Dead Space does, which you're like, Dead Space is also a game where violence is the core to its identity, but they added an option to actually have like kind of like these big sensor blur bars over top of the gore in Dead Space, the remake, whenever it
right.
shows up on screen. So you cut off a monster's leg and a big blur pops up. So like they have that for people who need it. I don't think it's for the monsters. I think it's for like the humans that you see get messed up. And
Yeah.
having that, but for this game, would be really smart. Like people, I feel like people, a lot of people, I feel like me, you, we have a different mindset than the average person because we're designers. We can immediately start thinking of solutions to the problem. With other people's like, I don't know how they would even think about changing it because it's so intrinsic to the gameplay. And whereas me, you
Like
can
there's
immediately go, I can think of 1,000 ways off
oh
top.
yeah. Oh
Like,
yeah. And especially as a person with a like I have a weak stomach. I can't I love Mortal Kombat. Probably like not love, but like I like that game. I like the series. I like what it's done for gaming, and like the fact that it established the ERSB system is so silly to me. So it's like it's got a special place in my heart. After like when I saw gameplay of 11 and I was like I can never play these games
understandable.
because like yeah, it's like I can't there's some TV series that I can't watch
Makes
because of the
sense.
gore in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like 11 like back when the games were first like becoming 3D and all that, the gore was
Yeah.
cartoonish. It's like it cartoon violence, etc., and it was stomachable.
And
But
they need
like
to go
this is
back to that.
like yeah,
Because I think
yeah, it's
at this
like
point it's a little too, it's getting too mean spirited, and I think they need to go back to like literally Looney Tunes esque violence, where it's still bloody and gory, but it's just goofy and funny.
it doesn't it feels too real, and it's like it kind of gives me a bit of an ick because it's like I don't know, it just doesn't ugh, I don't
Like,
like
and
it.
having the option to remove blood in the moment to moment combat, being able to
Mhm.
blur out the fatal blows, the gory part of the fatal blows, and also changing the color of blood, which is something that in Mortal Kombat 11 there were characters with blood that wasn't, like, with insides and blood that were different colors. I think it was Devorah's insides were and her blood were green, and Noob
Right.
Saibot was black and inky, so it was hard to make out the details. And making that like you can change that in the settings to make it the blood black and have the insides be all black, and the only thing you can see, instead of being able to see like the actual organs, you just see it's just black, and all you see is the skeleton, kind of like when cartoon characters get electrocuted, and it's just
Yeah.
a black outline of their body, and all you see is their skeleton. Because I don't think they're going to demonetize you for
A
a
skeleton.
clean, no blood, just bones breaking. I don't think they're going to demonetize you for that. So having that, like having something that does that for the fatal blows whenever they do their little X-ray moments, would be dope. And of course, having, like I said, the blur. And then fatalities, you don't need to blur those because those are optional. You
Right.
just choose not to do fatality. If you're going to do a fatality, that's on you. Like they don't need to blur the fatalities because if you do that, that's your fault. You
Right.
you don't have
Like
to.
you knew what you were getting into.
You literally have to precisely press buttons to do that. That's your fault.
I think the last Mortal Kombat game I was able to play without getting queasy was
9.
no, before that
DC,
DC,
yeah,
the
I was
one
gonna
with
say. Well, that's because that just straight up didn't have gore in it because it was DC.
that makes
And
sense.
that's another conversation. Like, before I get into the story mode of the game, is that you know people are so obsessed with the violence in Mortal Kombat, which I get, and I think like it shouldn't go away. I personally like it a lot. It hasn't gotten to the point to where it bothers me, but I still understand why it should. There should be an option for people to be able to enjoy it without that. And also with the cutscenes in the story mode should also have some blurs for the gory moments that happen in the cutscenes. But also, like I want another Mortal Kombat vs DC really bad. But
Yeah, that game
people
was really
people are
fun.
people are so against it because it wouldn't have the gore in it, and it's like another thing about this is some people like Mortal Kombat because yeah, sure, gore is a big part of personality, but first and foremost, it is a fighting game. Some people just like to play fighting games because the mechanics are fun, and also it has really cool characters, and they like that, but might not like the gore. And those people should have an option to play the game without as much gore or no gore, if possible. Um, and when they cross over with stuff, it is okay for Mortal Kombat to not have gore when they cross over. When it comes to their own
Yeah.
games, of course they should have gore. That's the identity of the game. But when they cross over with DC, they don't need gore. And let me tell you something: if they can come up with all these creative ways to murder people, I promise you, they can come up with creative ways to have the villains who do kill people and the heroes who do kill people do like their version of fatalities that isn't bloody, and the ones who don't kill people like Batman do their version of fatalities that just doesn't involve murder. They can come up with creative ways to do fatalities that isn't gory with
Right.
when it comes to making a game that's a crossover with DC. And I'm sure they're going to make another one eventually with how popular Injustice and Mortal Kombat by themselves have been. So them crossing over again just makes sense. But at the same time, I think the powers that be over at NetherRealm do have this weird thing where I feel like they are of the opinion of the gore is necessary, and it's not, and you can have modes that don't need the gore, and because of that, it might be a while before we see another Mortal Kombat vs DC because they probably don't want to make it if they can't brutally murder these superheroes, which is like, bruh, calm down.
Right. Sucks because I really like that game. I it's probably my favorite Mortal Kombat,
Yeah,
honestly.
and
And
every
I'm not even
time
really a
a DC
mhm.
character shows in Mortal Kombat or Mortal Kombat shows up in Injustice, I'm like, I need a whole game of this again.
Please. It's like I'm not even really a fighting games person, but I loved playing that game to pieces because my aunt had it on her PlayStation, and we would play it together. Like that was something that we did together, and that's I think the piece about fighting games that I like the most. It's the playing with someone else, you know?
Yeah, and I think that game like didn't do well because of several things. And I think a lot of people, I think, uh, say it's because of the gore, because it was the lack of gore, when really it was just the game itself wasn't good mechanically.
Yeah.
Because if Injustice does well and it's a fighting game made by NetherRealm without gore, what makes you think a game with these two extremely popular franchises clashing wouldn't do well? Especially with how much money Mortal Kombat has been making. Oh my God, Mortal Kombat makes so much money. It's one of the highest grossing like fighting game franchises out right now. Like it makes a ridiculous amount of money. Mortal Kombat vs DC 2 would make so much money.